Are we wrongfully assuming that if the Big Ten decides to expand, that they will definitely be looking at more Pac-12 schools? Could they actually look into the state of Texas for their next additions to the conference? Pull up a chair, sit back, relax, and let's talk about it. What is up, college sports fans, fellow members of Mountaineer Nation? This is Coos, and welcome into another edition of Coos' Corner. So pull up that chair, sit back, relax, and let me serve you up this shot of top-shelf college football knowledge. Let's dig into the show, and that is, could the Big Ten actually look at the state of Texas for their next members instead of the West Coast, or could they do both? Could they add 4 teams, and 2 of them come from the state of Texas? And who are the 2 teams I'm talking about? I'm talking about TCU and Houston. Would TCU and Houston be potential candidates for Big Ten expansion? What gave me the idea for this video? A guy I follow on Twitter and another podcaster by the name of Greg Pflugar, who has a show called College Football's Peak Around the Corner. And he also has accurately predicted a lot of the previous college football expansion moves, days or even weeks before they happen. He's a great follow on Twitter. I recommend you go follow him. I'll leave his Twitter handle in the description box. But he put out a tweet the other day, or shared a screenshot of a tweet from TCU AD Jeremiah Donati, who put out a tweet that he was flying to Chicago. And for those of you watching on YouTube, it's up on the screen now. And that tweet was retweeted with the Mr. Miyagi head nod emoji. For those of you who might be listening, I'll describe it to you. By the UCLA AD, Martin Jarmond. Now, Martin Jarmond eventually deleted his tweet, but Pflugar was able to screenshot it and get it out to people, and it got a lot of people talking. Chicago's the corporate headquarters for the Big Ten. Does that mean TCU's talking to the Big Ten? Honestly, it probably does not. I'll be honest with you, because I think if they were, he wouldn't have put it out in a tweet. There's a lot of reasons an AD could be flying to Chicago. He could be meeting with alums, with boosters. He could be, there's a rumor that they were looking to become the Jordan brand of the Big 12. A lot of things. There's a lot of reasons he could be flying to Chicago. Could have been a personal trip. Who knows? And the UCLA AD was probably just, having some fun, but decided it was probably best not to have that fun because it did get people talking. But that being said, I got to thinking, is that actually possible? Could TCU be a fit in the Big Ten? And then along with that, what about Houston? Because we know through reliable sources, that before the Pac-12 made the decision not to expand last year, they were looking to potentially add TCU and Houston to the league. So if they would fit into the Pac-12, because we know the Pac-12 has high academic standards for the most part, just like the Big Ten does, would they also be a fit for the Big Ten? So I decided, let's look at the academics and then also look at the football and the markets and all the other criteria that would go in to expansion decisions. So I put together a spreadsheet. As you can see here, I looked at average academic rank, which I took the average of the U.S. News World Report and the Wall Street Journal academic rankings and put them together as an average of TCU and Houston and compared that to the average Big Ten institutions. So average academic rank, TCU has an average academic ranking of 117, which is pretty darn good. TCU is a top 40 academic institution, so they are a strong academic institution. Houston, average academic ranking of 250, far below the average of the Big Ten, which is 82. TCU would actually be ranked 13th in the Big Ten in average academic ranking, ahead of only Iowa and Nebraska. Houston would be last. Now, just as a side note and an interesting tidbit here, I looked at SMU real quick just out of curiosity, and they actually would be ranked 9th in the Big Ten where they would become a member. Now, I'm looking at only current Big Ten members. I did not include USC and UCLA in this, only because I didn't have their information readily available to me at the moment. Still gives us a good idea, right? TV viewership, average per week. TCU, 1.5 million average per week. Houston, 700,000 average per week. Average in the Big Ten is 1.75 million. Both fall below that. TCU not by a huge margin, though. TCU would be tied for 7th in the league with Nebraska for TV viewership. Houston would be tied for 11th with Maryland. You look at the average fan base size rank. TCU, average fan base size rank of 58th in the country. Houston, 82. And the average in the Big Ten is 31. Remember, they have the largest fan base in the country in Ohio State in the Big Ten, so that definitely helps that number. They also have some other large fan bases like Michigan and Wisconsin. But when you look at average fan base size rank, TCU would be 13th in the league, ahead of Indiana and Northwestern. Houston would be last again. Football 5-year rank. Now, this looks at more than just wins and losses. It looks at the overall value of the football program over the past 5 years. Both programs actually do well here. TCU would be 20th in the country. Houston is 29th. Average in the Big Ten is 47. TCU would actually be 6th in the Big Ten, and Houston would be 7th, where they joined today in the current Big Ten conference. Now look at 50-mile population of where the schools are located. This is kind of a new one I added for this video. 50 miles of TCU is 6 million people. They're in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, huge market. Same with Houston, 6 million people within 50 miles. Average in the Big Ten is 3 million. Now, that being said, though, that's kind of misleading because the Big Ten has some very large fan bases. They have are very large population centers with New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Chicago. Actually, they have the 4 largest television markets in the league now that USC and UCLA are coming in. They will have the New York market, which is 1, the LA market, which is 2, the Chicago market, which is 3, and the Philadelphia market, which is 4. They have all 4 of those markets already. Could they go after the 5th largest market in Dallas-Fort Worth? Something to think about. Or another top 10 market in Houston, who's 8th in the country. So that's something to think about here, and I would not necessarily rule it out. Okay, and I'll tell you at the end if I think these schools would be good additions or not, if I think they would add them or should add them. But I definitely think it's intriguing to think about them as potential candidates. Let's look at the pros and cons of adding TCU or Houston to the Big Ten. First, the pros of adding TCU. They align with the Big Ten in several academic categories. Like I said, they're a top 40 academic institution. They have high graduation rates. They have strict admittance policy, so which that helps improve that graduation rate. They align from a football brand perspective, very strong brand, have done very well on the football field the past 2 decades. Gary Patterson really built that program up, got them into a Power 5 conference. So they have brand recognition. Obviously, the large TV market in Dallas-Fort Worth. It would get the Big Ten into a new footprint in the state of Texas. That would help add additional households for the Big Ten network to take advantage of. And it would also be great for recruiting for the current Big Ten institutions, would give them a new recruiting base, a new state to go recruiting in. And then touch on basketball real quick. TCU's not been great historically in basketball, but they are up and coming. Jamie Dixon's doing a great job with that program. They're on the come up. So that would help out as well. The cons of adding TCU, really only one I could find was they don't spend a whole lot of money on research. They're not an AAU school. They're not even a Carnegie R1 research institution. Now, Kevin Warren did say in an interview, being an AAU institution is not a requirement for future members. They do like it. It is definitely something they look at, but it's not a requirement. But TCU's not even R1. They only spend a little over $6 million a year, according to the numbers I'm using for this video, in research. Most teams in the current Big Ten today are spending $400 or $500 million a year in research. So huge discrepancy there. Okay, would that be enough to keep TCU out? I don't know. I look forward to hopefully hearing Tony Altimore's opinion on that if he sees this. Now let's look at Houston. The pros of adding Houston. They would align from a football perspective. Like I said, their football program's on the rise. They had a successful season last year. They're expected to have another successful season this year. Financially, they have a large financial backing with Tillman Fertitta, the wealthy owner of the Houston Rockets, who puts a lot of money into the program and was very instrumental in getting them into the Big 12. Like I said, they have the 8th largest TV market in the country, and they have an even better basketball brand. Houston is a top 10 basketball program currently in the nation today. Historically, they're not that great, but they are on the come up and are doing very well. They're one of the most successful teams in the country right now. So it would really strengthen the Big Ten's basketball brand if Houston were to become a member of the league. Now, the cons for Houston, there are more for Houston than there were for TCU, in my opinion. They're not as strong academically. They would be last in the league. Like I said, their average academic rank's only 250. They're not AAU. Now, they are R1. They are a Carnegie R1 research institution. They do spend about $200 and some million a year in research, which is actually higher than current Big Ten member Indiana. But they fall short in other academic areas. They don't have a huge fan base. Even though they're in a big city, it's a pro sports town, so a lot of the fans aren't that passionate about college sports, and they have lower TV ratings than what TCU has. So, are TCU and Houston good candidates for the Big Ten? And here's what I looked at. I looked at 3 criteria. I looked at market, brand, and academics. And when you look at the last 4 schools that have been added to the Big Ten, you look at Penn State, you look at Rutgers, you look at Maryland, and you look at Nebraska. And Nebraska's kind of an outlier. They're not in a big city. They're not that strong academically, but they are a huge brand in college football. So they brought value in that regard. And the brand they brought in from football perspective was enough to outweigh the negatives they bring. Okay? So that's why Nebraska was added, in my opinion. You look at the other 3, they all fit at least 2 of the 3 criteria I mentioned. Rutgers, huge market, strong academics, not so much on the brand. Maryland, big market in D.C., strong academics. Brand is just okay. Penn State, large market, strong brand, strong academics. They actually fit all 3 categories. So I thought, in order for these teams to be a good fit, they would have to meet at least 2 of the 3 criteria, right? We look at USC and UCLA, who's getting added. I didn't think to mention them. They bring all 3. They all bring market, brand, and academics. So do TCU or Houston fit at least 2 of the 3 criteria? Actually, TCU meets all 3, in my opinion. They fit the market. They're a strong brand and academically. Now, like I said, they don't fit from a research perspective, but they fit everywhere else. So as long as the Big Ten would be willing to look past the lack of money they put into research. So, I don't know. I don't know what the Big Ten is looking at here. I don't know what their top priorities are. But just in my opinion, I think TCU would actually be a good addition to the Big Ten. Now, I hate to say that as a Big 12 fan, but I'm just being real here. TCU's a strong brand. And because of their top 40 academic ranking, I think they would fit in with the Big Ten. Now, Houston. I don't think Houston would be a fit right now. Keep in mind, I said right now. I think they're on the cusp. Houston, in my opinion, would only fit 1 of the 3 criteria today, and that would be market. It would bring the Houston market, which is very, very strong. I don't think they fit from a brand perspective just yet, but I think the only reason that is because they've not been in a Power 5 conference yet. If you put them in a Power 5 conference, I think in 5 to 10 years they will have a strong brand in football. And then you look at academics. I think there again, even though they fit the criteria from a research perspective, they don't really fit anywhere else, and they have a very low academic ranking. I don't think their brand is strong enough to overcome the low academic rankings that the Big Ten requires. That being said, even though I think TCU's a fit, I still think Washington and Stanford, outside of Notre Dame, of course, should be the first 2 schools that the Big Ten brings in, because Stanford and Washington both have even higher academic rankings than TCU. With Stanford, you get all that endowment money. They both are strong brands, especially Washington on football. Washington's had some recent success on the football field. So I would argue that Washington and Stanford would be the first 2 calls they should make outside of Notre Dame. But it looks like Notre Dame's not going to join, so I think they need to move on from them. But TCU could be in that next 2. Don't think it's out of the question that TCU and or Houston could be at least in the conversation as viable additions to the Big Ten Conference. Let me know, Cougars Corner family, do you think I'm nuts? Do you think I'm crazy for even saying this as an idea? But it's fun to speculate. Look, nobody's saying this is going to happen, but when I saw that tweet, it got my mind thinking, hey, is this actually something that would make sense? I think TCU would. I don't think Houston would, at least not yet. But in 5 to 10 years, that could change. I'll be interested to hear Mr. Tony Altimore's opinion on this. Does he think TCU would also be a good fit? And what's he think about Houston? Tony, if you're listening, please let me know in the comment section. I'd love to hear it. Cougars Corner family, please support my channel financially. You can buy my merch. And if you buy my merch between now, which is August the 19th, through August the 21st, you get free standard shipping on anything you buy. You can get the new design I've got up on the screen right now, which is West Virginia versus the world. You can get the West Virginia JD design. You can get a couple Cougars Corner designs I've come out with, and I'm working on another one that I think you all will like. So if you want to do that, you can click the link at the top of my description box. There's a little heart underneath this video called the thanks button. You can hit that button, make a one-time donation, leave a comment. The comment will get highlighted. I'll be more likely to see it. It's basically like a super chat that you do on a live stream, except it's in a pre-recorded video. So check that out. If you want to support me absolutely free, you can like the video, share the video, comment under the video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. With all that being said, I really appreciate you tuning in to this show. And until the next one, keep country roads.